The bullet grazed past Benjamin Andrews' shoulder, so close she could feel the heat of it. And in that moment, with her 3 young sons huddled behind her in the wagon, she knew her husband's debts had finally caught up with them. Except her husband was already 6 feet under, and she was alone. The rider coming toward her now through the Arizona dust wasn't the debt collector she expected, though. He was taller, broader, and when he fired his rifle into the air, the men chasing her wagon scattered like tumbleweeds in a storm. "Madam, you need to keep moving," the stranger shouted, his horse keeping pace with her panicked team. "There's a ranch 2 miles north. Follow me." Benjamin didn't have time to argue or ask questions. Her arms ached from holding the reins, and behind her, 8-year-old Thomas was crying while 6-year-old James tried to comfort him. Little William, barely 4, sat silent and wide-eyed, clutching his older brother's shirt. She followed the stranger, her wagon bouncing over the rough terrain outside Ash Fork, Arizona, in the scorching summer of 1882. The ranch appeared like a mirage, a sprawling wooden structure with a barn and corrals that looked well-maintained despite the harsh landscape. The stranger dismounted quickly and helped her pull the wagon behind the barn, out of sight from the main road. He was younger than she initially thought, maybe 30 at most, with dark hair that needed cutting and eyes the color of desert sage. "Mitchell Irving," he said, removing his hat. "This is my place. Those men won't follow you here." "Why not?" Benjamin asked, her voice shaking as she climbed down from the wagon. Her sons peered out from behind the canvas covering, because they know better. Mitchell's jaw tightened. Those were Carson's men. "He thinks he owns this territory, but he knows I don't back down." He looked at the wagon, then at her. "You're running from something." "From everything," Benjamin admitted, too exhausted to lie. She turned to help her sons down. Thomas came first, his face streaked with tears and dust. James followed, trying to look brave despite the fear in his eyes. William reached for her immediately, and she lifted him onto her hip even though her arms trembled with fatigue. Mitchell watched this scene with something unreadable in his expression. "You have children." "3 sons," Benjamin said, lifting her chin despite her circumstances. She wouldn't apologize for her boys or be ashamed of them. They were all she had left in this world. "Their father died 4 months ago, cholera, but before he died I didn't know he'd borrowed money from dangerous men. They came for payment, and when I couldn't give it, they came for everything else." "How much?" Mitchell asked. $800. The amount felt impossible, like naming the distance to the moon. Mitchell was quiet for a moment, studying her face, then her son's. Thomas had stopped crying and was staring at the horses in the corral. James stood close to his mother, protective despite his young age. William had buried his face in Benjamin's neck. "Come inside," Mitchell finally said. "You all look like you haven't eaten in days." Benjamin wanted to refuse out of pride, but William's stomach growled loudly enough for everyone to hear, and she couldn't let pride feed her children. She followed Mitchell into the ranch house, a surprisingly tidy space with solid furniture and clean floors. It was a bachelor's home, but he clearly took care of it. Mitchell moved efficiently, pulling out bread, butter, dried beef, and cheese. He poured milk from a pitcher in the cold box and set it all on the table. "Sit," he said simply. The boys didn't need to be told twice. They fell on the food with the desperation of children who'd been rationing for too long. Benjamin sat more slowly, torn between hunger and humiliation. She'd been raised better than this, had married a man who promised her the world. Now she was accepting charity from a stranger. "Eat," Mitchell said, his voice softer. "We'll talk after." She ate, and the food was simple but good. Mitchell sat across from her, drinking coffee and watching her sons with an expression she couldn't quite name. Not pity exactly, something else. When the boys had eaten their fill, Thomas built up enough courage to speak. "Mister, are those your horses outside?" "They are," Mitchell replied. "You have any that are good for racing?" "Thomas," Benjamin warned, but Mitchell smiled, the first real smile she'd seen from him. "I've got a bay mare that's faster than lightning when she wants to be. Her name's Comet." "Can we see her?" James asked, his earlier wariness fading. Mitchell looked at Benjamin, asking permission without words. She nodded, too tired to do anything else. He led the boys outside, and she watched through the window as he showed them the horses, lifting William up so he could pet Comet's nose. The mare was patient, and Mitchell was gentle with them, pointing out different horses and explaining their temperaments. Benjamin sank into a chair, and for the first time in months, she let herself feel the full weight of her exhaustion. She'd been running on fear and determination, but both were finite resources. She put her head in her hands and took a shaking breath. When Mitchell came back inside, the boys were still outside, talking excitedly among themselves near the corral fence. He'd given them strict instructions about staying away from the more temperamental horses. "Your sons are polite," he said, pouring himself more coffee. "You've raised them well." "I've tried." Benjamin straightened, wiping her eyes quickly. "Mr. Irving, I'm grateful for your help, but I need to be honest. I can't pay you. I have nothing. The wagon and team aren't even fully mine. I still owe money on them too." "I didn't ask for payment," Mitchell said. "Then what do you want?" The question came out more sharply than she intended, born from too many months of men wanting things from her, making offers that made her skin crawl. Mitchell's expression didn't change, but his eyes held understanding. "A meal and a safe place to rest aren't transactions, Mrs. Andrews. They're basic human decency." The use of her married name, which she'd mentioned without thinking earlier, steadied her somehow. "Miss," she corrected. "I mean, I was married, but I don't feel like I should use his name anymore. He left us with nothing but debts and trouble. My name is Benjamin Amelia Andrews. My parents wanted a boy." She said it matter-of-factly, used to explaining the unusual name, Benjamin. Mitchell said it like he was testing how it felt. "That's a strong name, suits you." She almost laughed. "I don't feel very strong right now. Strength isn't about how you feel, it's about what you do anyway." He leaned back in his chair. "You've been driving that wagon, protecting 3 children, running from dangerous men. That's strength." Benjamin looked at him properly then, really looked. Mitchell Irving was handsome in a rough way, with sun-weathered skin and calloused hands. But it was his eyes that caught her, honest and direct. She'd learned to read men quickly over the past few months, to spot the ones who saw a desperate widow as an opportunity. Mitchell's eyes held none of that calculating hunger. "Why did you help me?" she asked. "Why wouldn't I?" Most people wouldn't have. Most people would have let Carson's men take what they wanted and looked the other way. Mitchell's jaw tightened again. "I'm not most people. And Carson's a bully who hides behind hired guns. I don't have much tolerance for men who prey on women and children." "You live alone out here." "I do." He paused. "My parents started this ranch. They died 3 years back. Fever took them both within a week of each other. I've been running it since. Got some ranch hands who come during busy seasons, but mostly it's just me." "That sounds lonely," Benjamin said before she could stop herself. "It is." The admission was simple, honest. "But lonely is better than bad company." Outside, William laughed at something Thomas had said, the sound carrying through the window. Benjamin's chest tightened. Her sons laughed so rarely now. "You can stay," Mitchell said suddenly. "The 3 of you and your boys. There's room in the house. The back bedroom isn't being used. You can stay until you figure out what comes next." "Mr. Irving, I couldn't possibly—" "Mitchell," he interrupted. "And yes, you could. This house is too big for one person anyway. Your boys could help with light chores if it makes you feel better about it. God knows there's always work on a ranch, but mainly you'd be safe here. Carson's men won't come on my property." "Why?" Benjamin asked again. "Why are you doing this?" Mitchell was quiet for a long moment, looking out the window at her sons. "My mother always wanted more children," he said finally. "But after me, she couldn't have any more. She used to say this house was built for a family, built for noise and life and the sound of children playing. When she died, I thought that dream died with her." He looked back at Benjamin. "I'm not saying I expect anything from you, but maybe we could help each other. You need a safe place and I could use the company. Your boys could use some stability. Seems like it might work out for everyone." Benjamin felt tears threatening again, but these were different from the desperate, exhausted tears she'd been crying for months. "I have 3 sons already," she said, needing him to understand what that meant. "I come with complications and responsibilities and noise and mess. We're not a peaceful proposition." Mitchell smiled then, really smiled, and it transformed his whole face. "Then I'm already a father," he said, "if you'll let me be." The words hung in the air between them, enormous and terrifying and somehow exactly right. Benjamin thought about objecting, about explaining all the reasons this was crazy, about maintaining proper distance and not imposing. But William laughed again outside, and Thomas was asking James something about horses, and she was so tired of running, so tired of being afraid. "Just until I can figure things out," she said, knowing it was a weak condition, knowing she had no other options. "Until I can find work and save money." "However long you need," Mitchell agreed. That first night, Benjamin tucked her 3 sons into the big bed in the back bedroom. It was the first real bed they'd slept in since leaving their old home. Thomas fell asleep almost immediately, exhausted from the day's excitement and terror. James lasted a bit longer, asking quiet questions about whether they were really safe, whether the bad men would come back. William just held tight to Benjamin's hand. "Are we going to stay here?" James asked. "For a while," Benjamin said carefully. "I like Mr. Irving," Thomas murmured, half asleep. "He's nice." "He is," Benjamin agreed, "but we need to be good guests, understand? Help where we can, be polite, don't make trouble." "We won't, Mama," James promised. She kissed each of their foreheads and left them, pulling the door partly closed. Mitchell was in the main room, banking the fire for the night. "There's blankets in the chest by the window," he said. "I'll sleep out here on the couch." "Mr. Irving, this is your house. I can't take your bedroom." "Mitchell," he corrected again. "And you're not. That was my parents' room. I sleep in the loft." He gestured to a ladder she hadn't noticed, leading to a space above. "The couch is actually more comfortable than it looks. I fall asleep here half the time anyway." Benjamin didn't have the energy to argue further. She thanked him quietly and retreated to the bedroom, closing the door behind her. Her sons were already asleep, 3 small forms in the big bed. She lay down beside them, and for the first time in months, she felt something that might have been the beginning of hope. The next morning came early. Benjamin woke to sunlight streaming through unfamiliar windows and the sound of her sons already awake and whispering excitedly. She rose quickly, smoothing her dress. Aware of how travel-worn and dusty she must look in the main room, Mitchell was making breakfast, and her sons were watching him with fascination as he flipped pancakes in a large iron skillet. "Morning," Mitchell said, noticing her. "Coffee's ready if you want some." "You didn't have to cook," Benjamin said, feeling awkward. "I was cooking anyway, just made more." He slid pancakes onto plates, and the boys descended on them with enthusiasm that might have been embarrassing if Mitchell didn't seem genuinely amused by it. After breakfast, Mitchell showed them around the ranch properly. He had about 200 acres, he explained, with cattle and horses. The work was manageable but constant. He grew some of his own food, had a well that ran clean and deep, and kept the operation small enough to handle mostly alone. Thomas and James were entranced by everything, asking constant questions. William stayed close to Benjamin but watched everything with wide eyes. Mitchell answered every question patiently, even the ones that seemed silly. When Thomas asked if the chickens had names, Mitchell admitted he'd never thought to name them, and Thomas immediately began suggesting options. "You don't have to entertain them all day," Benjamin said quietly while the boys were examining the chicken coop. "They can be a lot." "I like them," Mitchell said simply. "They're good kids. You can tell they've been taught right." "Their father was good at the beginning," Benjamin found herself saying. "When we first married, he was different, kind. But things got hard and he started gambling, borrowing money he couldn't pay back. By the end, I barely recognized him." "That wasn't your fault," Mitchell said. "I know, but I still chose him. I still brought children into that situation. You couldn't have known what he'd become. And you got your sons out. That's what matters." Benjamin wanted to believe him. They walked back toward the house, and she noticed things she'd been too frightened and exhausted to see the day before. The place was well maintained but had that indefinable quality of a home missing something. No curtains in the windows, no garden near the house, no small touches that made a place feel lived in rather than just inhabited. "I could help," she offered. "While we're here, I can cook and clean, tend a garden if you'd want one. I can sew and mend. I'm not useless, even if I don't know much about ranching." "I never thought you were useless," Mitchell said. "But if you want to help, I won't stop you. Fair warning, though, I'm not used to anyone else's cooking. Might take me a while to adjust to food that actually tastes good." It was such a simple joke, but it made Benjamin smile, really smile, for the first time in what felt like years. They fell into a routine over the next few days that felt both strange and natural. Benjamin took over the cooking, and Mitchell's comment about his own cooking proved accurate. The man could make food that would keep you alive, but that was about the extent of it. She also cleaned, organized, and started planning a garden spot near the house. The boys flourished. Thomas followed Mitchell around like a shadow whenever Mitchell allowed it, learning about horses and cattle and ranch work. James was more reserved but clearly admiring, and he started taking responsibility for small chores without being asked, feeding chickens and gathering eggs. William slowly came out of his shell, and one morning Benjamin found him sitting on the porch with Mitchell, both of them quiet and comfortable in each other's presence. "He doesn't talk much," Benjamin had explained to Mitchell that first day. "Not since his father died." The doctor said it was the shock. Mitchell had nodded, understanding. "He'll talk when he's ready. Sometimes quiet is okay," and he'd been true to that, never pushing William, just including him naturally in whatever was happening. By the end of the first week, William spoke his first words since they'd arrived, asking Mitchell if he could pet Comet again. Mitchell had lifted him up without comment, as if this wasn't the miracle Benjamin knew it was, and let the boy run his small hands over the mare's neck. At night, after the boys were in bed, Benjamin and Mitchell fell into the habit of sitting on the porch, watching the sunset paint the Arizona sky in shades of orange and purple. They talked about small things mostly, safe things. Mitchell told her about his parents, about growing up on the ranch, about the challenges of the land and weather. Benjamin talked about her childhood in Kansas, about moving west with dreams of something better, about her sons and their different personalities. "Thomas is going to be tall like his father," she said one evening. "James has my temperament, serious and careful. William, I think he's going to surprise us all. He's quiet, but he watches everything, understands more than people think." "They're lucky to have you," Mitchell said. "I think it might be the other way around. They're what kept me going when everything fell apart. Mitchell was quiet for a moment. Can I ask you something? Yes. What made you finally run? You said your husband died 4 months ago and the debt collectors came. What was the last straw? Benjamin was quiet, the memory still sharp. One of Carson's men came to the house where we were staying, a boarding house in Prescott. He made it clear that there were other ways I could pay off the debt. He put his hand on my arm, looked at me in a way that made my skin crawl, and said I was young enough and pretty enough that we could work something out. She wrapped her arms around herself. Thomas saw it. He was only 8 years old, and he saw that man touch his mother like that, heard what he implied. The look on Thomas's face, that's what did it. I packed us up that night and left before dawn. Mitchell's hands clenched into fists. If that man ever shows up here, he said, his voice low and dangerous. He won't, Benjamin said quickly. We're safe here. You've made sure of that. You are safe here, Mitchell said, turning to look at her directly. I need you to know that. As long as you're on this ranch, nothing and no one will hurt you or your boys. I give you my word. The intensity in his eyes made Benjamin's breath catch. She believed him absolutely. Why? She asked, not for the first time. Why do you care so much? You don't even know us. I'm getting to know you, Mitchell said. And what I know I like. You're strong and smart and a good mother. Your boys are good kids who deserve a chance. Maybe that's reason enough. He paused. Or maybe I'm tired of being alone, and having you all here makes this place feel like a home instead of just a house where I sleep between work. Mitchell, Benjamin said softly, his name feeling natural on her lips now. I'm not asking for anything, he said quickly. I want you to know that. You can stay as long as you need. No expectations, no pressure. I just want you to know that having you here matters to me. That's all. Benjamin's heart was doing complicated things in her chest. She'd sworn off men after her husband's betrayal, after months of fending off unwanted advances and seeing the worst of what desperation could drive people to. But Mitchell was different. She'd known it from that first moment when he'd chased off Carson's men and offered help without asking for anything in return. It matters to me too, she admitted. Being here, feeling safe, watching my boys laugh again, that's because of you. They sat in comfortable silence after that, watching stars emerge in the darkening sky. Inside, one of the boys called out in his sleep, and Benjamin rose to check on them. When she came back, Mitchell had gone up to the loft, giving her privacy and space, always respectful of boundaries. 2 weeks passed, then 3. Benjamin started a garden, planting seeds Mitchell had stored away from seasons when his mother had tended similar plots. She made curtains from fabric she found in a trunk, pretty blue gingham that brightened the windows. She cooked meals that had Mitchell praising every bite, and slowly, the house transformed from a bachelor's functional space into something warmer. Thomas was learning to ride, sitting in front of Mitchell on his horse and laughing with pure joy. James had taken over care of the chickens completely and was considering names for each one, a project Thomas had started but James had systematized. William spoke more each day, short sentences at first, then longer ones, his personality emerging like a flower after rain. One morning, Benjamin woke to find Mitchell already teaching Thomas and James how to milk the cow. William was there too, watching seriously. The scene struck her with unexpected force, this man who owed them nothing, patiently showing her sons skills they'd need in life, treating them like they mattered. She realized with sudden clarity that she was falling in love with Mitchell Irving. The thought terrified her. It was too soon, too fast, too risky. She'd been wrong about a man before and it had cost her dearly, but even as she tried to talk herself out of it, she knew the truth. Mitchell was nothing like her late husband. He was steady where the other had been mercurial, honest where the other had been deceptive, kind where the other had become cruel. She was falling in love with him, and she had no idea what to do about it. That afternoon, a rider came to the ranch. Benjamin saw him from the garden and felt her blood run cold. She recognized him as one of Carson's men, one of the ones who'd been chasing her wagon that first day. Mitchell walked out to meet him, and Benjamin moved closer, her heart pounding. Thomas and James had seen the rider too and had come running from the barn. Benjamin gathered them close, William clinging to her skirt. "You're on private property," Mitchell said, his voice carrying across the yard. "Just delivering a message," the rider said. He was lean and mean-looking, with a scar across his cheek. "Mr. Carson wants to know if you're harboring a woman and 3 kids. Says she owes him money. Tell Carson I don't discuss who stays on my property with anyone, especially not hired guns. That's not real friendly, Irving." "Wasn't meant to be." Mitchell's hand rested casually near his gun. "You've delivered your message. Now deliver mine back to Carson. Anyone on my land without invitation gets treated as a trespasser, and I protect my property. Understand?" The rider's eyes found Benjamin and her sons. His gaze lingered in a way that made her skin crawl. "That her last warning," Mitchell said, his voice dropping dangerously low. "Leave now." The rider smiled unpleasantly but turned his horse. "Carson's patient, but not forever. He always collects his debts." He rode off, kicking up dust. Mitchell waited until he was completely out of sight before turning back. His expression softened when he saw Benjamin's face. "You're okay. He's gone. He knows we're here," Benjamin said, her voice shaking. "Carson knows. Doesn't matter. He won't come here." Mitchell walked closer. "Benjamin, look at me. I told you then, and I'm telling you now, you're safe here. Carson's a bully and a coward. He won't risk an actual fight. You don't know that. $800 is a lot of money." "It is," Mitchell agreed, "but I'm a good shot and Carson knows it. He also knows I have friends, other ranchers who don't care for him much. Starting trouble with me means starting trouble with them too. It's not worth it to him." Thomas tugged on his mother's sleeve. "Mama, are we going to have to leave?" The fear in his young voice broke Benjamin's heart. "No," Mitchell said before she could answer. He crouched down to Thomas's level. "You're not leaving unless you want to. This is your home now for as long as you want it to be. That man was just trying to scare you, but he can't hurt you here, I promise." "Really?" James asked, skeptical but hopeful. "Really," Mitchell confirmed. He stood looking at Benjamin. "All of you, you're home." That night Benjamin couldn't sleep. She lay in the bed with her sons, listening to them breathe, thinking about Carson and his men, about the debt that followed her like a shadow. $800 might as well be $8,000 for all her ability to pay it. She rose quietly and went to the main room. Mitchell was there, sitting by the low fire, clearly not sleeping either. "I'm sorry," Benjamin said. "I've brought trouble to your door." "You've brought life to my door," Mitchell corrected. "Trouble was already in the territory. Carson's been pushing his weight around for years." "This isn't about you, but it is. That money is a number." Mitchell stood, walking closer. "Benjamin, I'm going to say something and I want you to just listen, okay? Don't argue or object or tell me all the reasons I'm wrong. Just listen." She nodded, uncertain. "I could pay that debt," Mitchell said. $800 would be a stretch, but I have savings. I could pay Carson tomorrow and this would be over." "No," Benjamin said immediately. "Absolutely not. I can't let you. You didn't let me finish," Mitchell said gently. "I could pay it, but I'm not going to. Because paying Carson would tell him that threats and intimidation work, and I won't give him that satisfaction. But more than that, if I paid your debt, you'd feel obligated to me. You'd feel like you owed me, and I don't want that between us." "What do you want?" Benjamin asked, her voice barely a whisper. Mitchell took a careful step closer. I want you to stay because you want to, not because you're indebted. I want your boys to grow up here because it's home, not because you have nowhere else to go. And I want, when enough time has passed and you're ready, to tell you that having you here has changed everything for me. Benjamin's heart was racing. Mitchell, you don't have to say anything, he interrupted. I know it's too soon. I know you're still healing from everything you've been through. I just needed you to know where I stand, so you understand why I'll protect you without expecting anything back. Because what I want isn't something that can be owed or paid back. It's something that has to be freely given or it means nothing. What if I said I was starting to feel the same way? Benjamin asked, the words escaping before she could stop them. Mitchell's eyes widened. Are you? I don't know, she admitted honestly. I'm scared to. The last time I trusted my feelings about a man, it ended in disaster. But you're not him. You're nothing like him. And when I see you with my sons, when I watch you teaching Thomas to ride or sitting quietly with William or answering James's endless questions, I think maybe I could trust again. Maybe I could feel again. That's enough, Mitchell said softly. That's more than enough. We have time, Benjamin. There's no rush. Let yourself heal. Let your boys settle. We'll figure out the rest as we go. And Carson, leave Carson to me. The weeks that followed were tense but peaceful in their own way. No more riders came to the ranch, but the threat hung in the air like summer heat. Mitchell was careful, always aware of their surroundings, but he didn't let fear rule their lives. The boys continued their routines, learning and growing and becoming more confident each day. Benjamin found herself watching Mitchell more, noticing little things. The way he always made sure there was coffee ready in the morning because he'd learned she needed it to properly wake up. The way he'd fixed the squeaky board on the porch after she'd mentioned it once in passing. The way he smiled when William told him a rambling story about the chickens, giving the boy his full attention. One evening, Mitchell came back from town with supplies and something wrapped in brown paper. He gave it to Thomas with a small smile. Saw this and thought of you. Thomas unwrapped it to find a book about horses with detailed illustrations and information about different breeds. His face lit up like sunrise. Really? This is for me, if you want it, Mitchell said. Figured you're old enough to start reading about what you're learning. Thomas clutched the book like treasure, and that night Benjamin found him reading by lamplight, sounding out the harder words with fierce concentration. James was beside him, looking at the pictures and listening to his brother read. William was already asleep, tired from a day of helping in the garden. You didn't have to do that, Benjamin said to Mitchell later. Books are expensive. He loves horses. Seemed like something he'd enjoy. It's more than that. You're showing him he matters, that his interests matter. Do you know what that means to a child? Mitchell looked uncomfortable with the praise. I just wanted him to have something of his own. You're a good man, Mitchell Irving, Benjamin said softly. Their eyes met and held, and something electric passed between them. Mitchell took a step closer, then another. Benjamin, he said, his voice rough. Yes, I'd like to kiss you, if that would be okay, her breath caught. Every rational thought said it was too soon, too risky, too much. But her heart said something different entirely. Yes, she whispered. Mitchell cupped her face gently with his calloused hands and kissed her softly, carefully, like she was something precious. It was nothing like the kisses she'd known before, which had been demanding and possessive. This was a question and a promise, tender and respectful and full of restrained feeling. When they pulled apart, Benjamin was shaking. Oh, she said inadequately. Mitchell smiled, that transforming smile that made him handsome. Oh, he agreed. I wasn't expecting that, she admitted. Good or bad? Good, very good, maybe too good, she laughed shakily. I don't know what I'm doing, Mitchell. I don't know how to do this again, how to trust again. "We'll figure it out together," he said, still holding her face gently. "No expectations, remember. We move at whatever pace feels right to you." Over the following weeks, something bloomed between them, careful and genuine. Mitchell courted her in quiet ways, respecting her space and her past. He brought her wildflowers from the far pasture. He made sure she had time to herself when the boys were being particularly energetic. He listened when she talked and remembered the small things she mentioned. Benjamin found herself courting him back, in her own way. She made his favorite foods and learned how he took his coffee. She mended his shirts with careful stitches, and made sure there were always cookies in the jar because she'd noticed he had a sweet tooth. She sat with him in the evenings and talked about everything and nothing. The boys noticed, of course. Children always noticed. "Are you going to marry Mr. Irving?" James asked one day, characteristically direct. Benjamin paused in kneading bread. "Why do you ask?" "Because he looks at you the way Papa used to look at you before everything got bad, and you smile more now. Would it bother you if I did?" James considered this seriously. "No, I like Mr. Irving. He's nice to us and he's nice to you. Papa stopped being nice. Mr. Irving is always nice." "He is," Benjamin agreed. Thomas had opinions too, delivered with 8-year-old authority. "I think you should marry him. Then we could stay forever, and he could teach me to really ride, not just sitting in front of him." "That's not how it works," Benjamin said, amused. "Why not?" She didn't have a good answer for that. Even William weighed in his quiet way. He'd started calling Mitchell Mr. Mitch and followed him around when allowed. One evening he climbed into Benjamin's lap and said, "Mr. Mitch would be a good daddy." Benjamin's eyes filled with tears. "You really think so?" William nodded seriously. "He's nice, and he doesn't yell. And he makes you happy." Out of the mouths of babes, Benjamin thought. 2 months after they'd arrived at the ranch, everything changed. Mitchell had gone to town for supplies, taking Thomas with him as a treat. Benjamin was in the garden with James and William when 3 riders appeared on the road. She knew immediately who they were. Carson's men, more of them this time. Her blood ran cold. "James, take William and go to the barn," she said quietly, trying not to alarm them. "Hide in the loft like we practiced. Don't come out until I come get you or until Mr. Irving gets back." "Mama," James said, fear in his voice. "Go, now." The boys ran and Benjamin stood, wiping her hands on her apron. She wished desperately that Mitchell was here, but he wasn't and she'd have to face this alone. She walked toward the house, trying to keep herself between the riders and the barn where her boys were hiding. The riders dismounted, and one of them she recognized from before, the man with the scar. The other 2 were new, both rough-looking and armed. "Mrs. Andrews," the scarred man said, his voice mocking. "Mr. Carson sent us to collect." "I don't have the money," Benjamin said, fighting to keep her voice steady. "Yeah, we figured, but Carson's tired of waiting. So we're here to collect in other ways." His eyes roamed over her in a way that made her stomach turn. "Get off this property," Benjamin said, her hand moving toward the rifle leaning by the door. Mitchell had taught her to shoot over the past weeks, insisting she know how to protect herself. "Or what? You going to shoot all 3 of us?" "If I have to," the man laughed. "Heard you had spirit. Carson said to bring you back, let you work off the debt in his saloon. He's got a room upstairs for girls like you." Benjamin's hands were shaking, but she got them around the rifle. "I'm not going anywhere with you. This is private property and you're trespassing. Irving's not here to protect you now, is he?" "No," said Mitchell's voice from behind the men, "but I'm here now." Benjamin nearly sobbed with relief. Mitchell was on his horse and Thomas was beside him on Comet, eyes wide. Mitchell had his rifle already trained on the men. "Irving," the scarred man said, turning, "this isn't your business. It's my property, my house, and my family you're threatening. Seems like it's exactly my business. Your family. The man's eyebrows rose. Didn't know you'd gotten married. Plans are in the works, Mitchell said, not taking his eyes off the men. Now you've got about 5 seconds to get back on those horses and leave before I decide you're a threat that needs eliminating. There's 3 of us, one of the other men said, and I'm a better shot than all 3 of you combined. Ask around about me if you don't believe it, but you won't get the chance if you're dead. Mitchell's voice was cold and hard. Benjamin, take Thomas inside. Benjamin wanted to argue, wanted to help, but she also knew Mitchell needed to know they were safe. She took Thomas's hand and pulled him inside, watching through the window. Tell Carson his debt is paid, Mitchell said. I'm paying it. But if I see any of you or any of Carson's men near this ranch or this woman again, there won't be talking. There'll just be shooting. Understand? The men exchanged glances. The scarred one seemed ready to argue, but one of the others grabbed his arm. Not worth it, Jake. Look at his eyes. He means it. Carson won't like this, Jake said. Carson can take it up with me directly if he has a problem. Man to man, no hired guns. But I'm guessing he won't, because Carson's a coward who hides behind men like you. Mitchell's voice was filled with contempt. Now get off my land. The men mounted slowly, trying to save face, but they left. Mitchell waited until they were completely gone before dismounting. He walked to the house and Benjamin opened the door, Thomas right behind her. Are you okay? Mitchell asked, checking her over with his eyes. I'm fine. You came back just in time. She was shaking now, the fear catching up with her. Thomas, go get your brothers from the barn. Tell them it's safe. Thomas ran off and Benjamin sagged against the doorframe. Mitchell caught her, pulling her into his arms. She let herself be held, let herself feel safe. I meant what I said, Mitchell said into her hair. About you being my family, about the plans. I know I said we had time, that there was no rush, but Benjamin, I love you. I love your boys. And I want to make this real and permanent if you'll have me. Benjamin pulled back to look at him. You love me. I do. I have for weeks now. Maybe from the first day, if I'm honest. You're strong and brave and everything I didn't know I was looking for. And your boys, they've filled up all the empty spaces in this house and in my heart. So yes, I love you, all of you, and I want you to stay. Not as guests or charity cases, but as my family, as my wife and my sons. Mitchell, Benjamin said, tears streaming down her face now. I love you too. I've been so scared to say it, scared to feel it, but I do. And my boys love you. You've been more of a father to them in 2 months than their own father was in their whole lives. Then marry me, Mitchell said. Soon, tomorrow if possible, make this real. Let me protect you properly as my wife. Let me be their father officially. Yes, Benjamin said, laughing and crying at the same time. Yes, I'll marry you. Yes to all of it. Mitchell kissed her then, deep and thorough, and she kissed him back, pouring everything she felt into it. When they pulled apart, 3 boys were standing nearby, Thomas grinning widely, James looking pleased, and William smiling shyly. Did you ask her? Thomas demanded. Are you getting married? We are, Mitchell confirmed. If that's okay with you 3, can we call you Papa? William asked, his small voice clear. Mitchell's eyes went suspiciously bright. I'd like that very much. William ran to him and Mitchell scooped him up. Thomas and James crowded close and Benjamin joined them, and for a moment they were all just tangled together, a family. Wait, James said, pulling back slightly. Does this mean we get to stay forever? This is really our home now, forever, Mitchell promised. This is your home. You're my sons now, all 3 of you. They were married 3 days later in town. A small ceremony at the church with a few of Mitchell's friends as witnesses. Benjamin wore a simple dress, the nicest one she owned, and Mitchell wore a clean shirt and his Sunday best. The boys stood with them, Thomas and James as witnesses. William holding Benjamin's hand. The pastor asked if she took Mitchell to be her husband, and she said yes without hesitation. He asked if Mitchell took her and her children, and Mitchell said yes, his voice strong and sure. They exchanged simple rings, gold bands Mitchell had bought in town, and when the pastor pronounced them married, Mitchell kissed her gently while their sons cheered. Afterward, they went to the general store, and Mitchell filled out adoption papers for all 3 boys, legally making them his sons. Thomas Mitchell Irving, James Mitchell Irving, William Mitchell Irving. The boys watched him sign the papers with something like awe. "We have a new name," Thomas asked. "If you want it," Mitchell said. "You're still who you've always been, but now you're also legally my sons. No one can ever question that or try to take you away." "I want it," Thomas said firmly. James nodded agreement. William just hugged Mitchell's leg, which seemed like a scent enough. They went home, to the ranch that was truly home now, and had a feast of a dinner. Benjamin had cooked all day the day before, preparing food for a celebration. They ate and laughed, and the boys stayed up past their bedtime, too excited to sleep. When Benjamin finally got them to bed, she came out to find Mitchell on the porch, looking at the stars. She joined him and he pulled her close, his arm around her waist. "Happy?" he asked. "Happier than I ever thought I'd be again," she admitted. "You saved us, Mitchell, not just that first day, but every day since. You gave us a home and a future and a family." "You saved me too," Mitchell said. "This house was so empty before you came. I was just existing, not really living. Now everything's different, better, full." "What about Carson?" Benjamin asked. "Do you really think he'll let this go? I'm going to town tomorrow to pay him. I'll make it clear that the debt is settled and there's to be no more trouble. If he wants to argue about it, we'll settle it then. But I think he'll take the money and move on. Bullies usually do when someone stands up to them." Benjamin nodded, trusting him. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the night sky until Mitchell stood and offered his hand. "Come on, Mrs. Irving. Time for bed." Mrs. Irving. She'd never thought she'd take another man's name, but this felt right. She took his hand and let him lead her inside, to their room, their home, their life together. The night was gentle and sweet, Mitchell treating her with a tenderness that made her cry happy tears. He took his time, made sure she felt safe and cherished, and held her afterward like she was precious. She fell asleep in his arms, feeling completely at peace for the first time in years. Mitchell did go to town the next day, and he did pay Carson the $800. There was an argument, apparently, with Carson insisting Benjamin owed more due to interest and time. But Mitchell stood firm, and when Carson tried to intimidate him, Mitchell made it clear that any further harassment would be met with violence. Carson took the money and agreed to leave them alone, probably sensing that Mitchell meant every word. Life settled into a new rhythm after that. The boys thrived, growing taller and stronger and happier. Thomas became a skilled rider and helped with the cattle. James took over more of the daily chores around the house and showed a talent for fixing things. William came completely out of his shell, talking and laughing and showing a sharp mind for numbers. Benjamin made the house a true home, with gardens and curtains and warmth in every corner. She also learned to help with the ranch work, becoming a competent hand in her own right. Mitchell taught her everything patiently, and she proved a quick study. They worked side by side every day, building something together. Some days were hard, with bad weather or sick cattle or the 100 small disasters that came with ranch life. But they faced everything together, and that made all the difference. About 6 months after their marriage, Benjamin realized she was pregnant. She'd suspected for a few weeks, but wanted to be sure before saying anything. When she told Mitchell, his face went through a series of expressions: shock, joy, wonder, and finally settling on pure happiness. "A baby," he said, his hand moving to her still flat stomach. "Our baby." "Are you happy?" Benjamin asked, suddenly nervous. "Happy doesn't cover it," Mitchell said. "I never thought I'd have this, any of this. A wife, children, and now a baby. You've given me everything, Benjamin." "We gave each other everything," she corrected. They told the boys that night at dinner. Thomas looked pleased, James looked thoughtful, and William looked confused until they explained that he'd be a big brother to a baby, at which point he became very excited. "Will the baby live here?" William asked. "Of course," Mitchell said. "This is the baby's home, just like it's yours." "And you'll be the baby's papa," Thomas said, "just like you're ours." "That's right," Mitchell confirmed, his voice thick with emotion. The pregnancy progressed smoothly. Benjamin felt better than she had with any of her other pregnancies, probably because she wasn't stressed or scared or dealing with a difficult husband. Mitchell doted on her, making sure she rested enough, didn't lift anything too heavy, and had everything she needed. The boys were protective too, in their own ways. Thomas would rush to help her with anything physical. James brought her water constantly, convinced she needed to stay hydrated. William would sit with her and talk to her stomach, telling the baby about the ranch and the horses and everything they'd do together. As her belly grew, Mitchell would lie beside her at night, his hand on her stomach, feeling the baby kick and move. "Strong one," he'd say with pride. "Takes after the mother." "Or the father," Benjamin would reply, covering his hand with hers. Spring came, and with it, new life on the ranch. Calves were born, foals arrived, and the garden burst into bloom. Benjamin was huge now, tired and uncomfortable, but happy. The baby was due any day, and Mitchell had brought in the doctor from town to stay at the ranch for a week, just to be safe. The boys were excited and nervous. Thomas kept asking questions about when exactly the baby would come. James had thoroughly cleaned the cradle Mitchell had built, making sure it was perfect. William made drawings to decorate the baby's corner of the room. Benjamin went into labor on a warm April evening. Mitchell sent the boys to stay with a neighboring ranch, not wanting them to be scared by the sounds and stress of childbirth. Then he stayed by Benjamin's side through the whole thing, holding her hand, wiping her face, encouraging her. It was long and hard, but finally, as dawn broke, their baby was born. A boy, healthy and loud and perfect. "A son," the doctor said, placing the cleaned and swaddled infant in Benjamin's arms. "Congratulations." Benjamin looked down at the tiny face, then up at Mitchell, who was staring at the baby with wonder. "Our son," she said. "Our son," Mitchell repeated. He touched the baby's tiny hand, and the infant gripped his finger with surprising strength. "Hello, little one, I'm your papa." Tears streamed down Mitchell's face unashamedly. This was his son, his blood, his legacy. But as he looked at Benjamin and thought of Thomas, James, and William, he knew this baby wasn't more his than the others. They were all his sons, all equally loved, all equally important. "What should we name him?" Benjamin asked. They discussed names but hadn't decided. Now, looking at the baby's face, Mitchell said, "Matthew, after my father. Matthew Irving." "Matthew," Benjamin said, testing the name. "Matthew Mitchell Irving, I like it." The baby, Matthew, made a small sound, and they both laughed, exhausted and happy. When the boys came home later that day, they crowded around carefully to meet their new brother. Thomas was proud, puffing out his chest as the oldest. James was gentle, touching Matthew's tiny hand with one careful finger. William stared in fascination, asking 100 questions about the baby. "He's so small," William said. "Was I that small?" "Even smaller," Benjamin said. "You were the tiniest baby I'd ever seen." "But you grew big and strong, just like Matthew will." "Can he play yet?" Thomas asked. Not for a while, Mitchell said, amused. But when he's bigger, you can teach him things like I taught you. You'll be his big brothers, showing him how things work. The boys took this responsibility seriously. As Matthew grew, they were protective and helpful. Thomas would carry him around carefully, showing him the ranch. James would entertain him when he was fussy, making faces until the baby laughed. William would sit with him for hours, just keeping him company. Benjamin watched her family grow and felt blessed beyond measure. 4 sons, a husband who loved her deeply, a home that was truly theirs. It was more than she'd ever dreamed possible in those dark days when she'd been running, desperate and afraid. Matthew grew from infant to toddler, a happy child who adored his older brothers and followed them everywhere his small legs could carry him. The ranch prospered, with Mitchell's hard work and Benjamin's help making it one of the most successful in the area. They added on to the house, building more bedrooms, knowing they might need the space. Indeed, 2 years after Matthew's birth, Benjamin found herself pregnant again. This time it was a daughter, Emma, named after Mitchell's mother. The boys were thrilled to have a sister, treating her like a precious treasure. Matthew wasn't entirely sure about sharing attention but grew to love his little sister fiercely. Life wasn't without challenges. There were hard winters and dry summers, sick animals and crop failures, the normal struggles of ranch life. But they faced everything as a family together. Mitchell and Benjamin's love deepened with time, growing from that initial spark into something solid and lasting. Thomas grew into a young man, tall like his birth father but with Mitchell's steady temperament. He became an expert horseman and took over much of the cattle operation as he got older. James proved to have a head for business, managing the ranch's accounts and dealings with buyers. William surprised everyone by showing a talent for veterinary medicine, able to diagnose and treat animal ailments with uncanny accuracy. Matthew grew into a bright, energetic boy who loved everything about ranch life. Emma was the baby, spoiled by her 4 older brothers but also toughened by growing up with them, able to ride and rope as well as any boy. Years passed, peaceful and full. The ranch grew, their reputation spread, and the Irving family became well respected in Ash Fork and beyond. Benjamin often thought back to that terrified woman fleeing with 3 small boys in a wagon, and she could hardly recognize herself. She'd become strong, confident, happy. One evening, when Thomas was 19 and preparing to start his own small ranch on land Mitchell had bought for him, the whole family gathered for dinner. It was loud and chaotic, with Emma demanding attention, Matthew arguing with William about something, James trying to mediate, and Thomas telling stories about his day. Benjamin looked around the table and caught Mitchell's eye. He smiled at her, that same smile that had won her heart years ago, and she smiled back. He reached across the table and took her hand, squeezing gently. After dinner, when the children had scattered to their various activities, Mitchell and Benjamin stood on the porch, looking out at the land they'd built a life on. "You remember what you said that first day?" Mitchell asked. "When I offered to let you stay." "I said I had 3 sons already," Benjamin recalled, "and I said that made me already a father." Mitchell put his arm around her. "I meant it then, but I didn't fully understand what it meant. Now I do. Being a father isn't about blood, it's about choice. Showing up every day, teaching them, loving them, being there. Thomas, James, and William are as much my sons as Matthew and Emma. There's no difference in my heart." "I know," Benjamin said softly. "I've watched you with them all these years. You're the best father they could have asked for." "All of them. You saved them," Mitchell said. "When you ran, when you fought to keep them safe. But you saved me too. I was so alone before you came. I didn't even realize how alone until suddenly I wasn't anymore." "We saved each other," Benjamin said, echoing words from years ago. "And we built this together. This family, this home, this life." They stood in comfortable silence, watching the sun set over their land. In the distance, they could hear their children, Thomas teaching Matthew something about the horses, James and William debating, Emma singing to herself. The sounds of a family, alive and thriving. Thomas eventually married a nice girl from town, and they had children of their own, making Mitchell and Benjamin grandparents. James followed suit a few years later. William went to study with a veterinarian in Prescott, but came back often, eventually settling back at the ranch and opening a practice. Matthew showed signs of being just like his father, steady and hardworking. Emma declared she'd never marry and would run the ranch someday, and no one doubted she could do it. Benjamin and Mitchell grew old together, their hair turning gray, their movements slower, but their love as strong as ever. They'd sit on that same porch, watching their grandchildren play in the yard and remember when their own children were that small. "You ever regret it?" Benjamin asked one day, when they were both well into their 50s. "Taking us in that day, taking on 3 children and a desperate woman." Mitchell looked at her like she'd grown a second head. "Regret the best decision I ever made. Regret the life we built. Regret our family." He took her hand, his grip still strong despite the years. "Benjamin, that day you came into my life was the day my life truly started. Everything before was just waiting. I'd do it all again in a heartbeat. Even the hard parts, especially the hard parts, they made us who we are. They made our family strong." Benjamin leaned her head on his shoulder, content. She thought about that terrified woman fleeing in a wagon, about the 3 scared little boys, about the lonely rancher who decided to help. She thought about all the moments in between, the struggles and triumphs, the tears and laughter, the ordinary days that built a life. "I love you," she said simply. "I love you too," Mitchell replied. "Always have, always will." As the sun set over the Arizona landscape, painting the sky in brilliant colors, the sounds of their family filled the air. Children laughing, grandchildren playing, the ranch alive with the noise of people who belonged to each other. It was everything Benjamin had never dared hope for, everything Mitchell had quietly dreamed of, all come true through a chance meeting and a decision to help a stranger. The ranch would continue after they were gone, passed down to their children and grandchildren, a legacy of love and hard work. But for now, in this moment, Mitchell and Benjamin sat together, hands clasped, hearts full, surrounded by the family they'd built from broken pieces and second chances. Thomas rode up with his oldest son, stopping to check on his parents as he did most evenings. James arrived shortly after with papers for Mitchell to sign, some business deal he'd negotiated. William came from the barn, washing his hands after treating a horse. Matthew emerged from the fields, dusty and tired but smiling. Emma bounded out of the house, declaring dinner was almost ready and everyone should come in soon. They all gathered, this family stitched together from different beginnings but united in love. As they sat around the extended table, multiple generations breaking bread together, Benjamin caught Mitchell's eye again. He winked at her, and she had to suppress a laugh. After dinner, as the family lingered over coffee and dessert, Thomas raised his glass. "To my parents," he said, his voice carrying over the conversations, "who taught us what family really means." The others raised their glasses too, even the youngest grandchildren copying the gesture. "To family," they chorused. Mitchell's eyes were suspiciously bright, and Benjamin felt tears threatening. "To family," she agreed softly. Later, much later, when everyone had gone home or to bed, Mitchell and Benjamin prepared for sleep in the room that had been theirs for so many years. Benjamin brushed out her gray-streaked hair while Mitchell pulled off his boots with the careful movements of a man whose body had worked hard for decades. "You know," Benjamin said, watching him in the mirror, "I used to have nightmares about that time. Running, scared, not knowing what would happen to my boys, but I haven't had those dreams in years." "What do you dream about now?" Mitchell asked, coming to stand behind her. "This," she said simply. "I dream about the life we have. Sometimes I dream we're young again, just starting out. But mostly I dream about this exactly as it is, because it's better than anything I could have imagined." Mitchell kissed the top of her head. "Come to bed, wife. Coming, husband." They settled into bed, and as they had for countless nights, they talked quietly in the darkness. About the day, about the children and grandchildren, about plans for the ranch, about nothing and everything. Eventually, their words trailed off into comfortable silence. "Mitchell," Benjamin said softly, not sure if he was still awake, "thank you for that day, for every day after. For loving my sons like they were yours. For giving me a life I never thought I'd have." Mitchell pulled her closer. "Thank you for letting me, for trusting me with your heart and your boys, for making my house a home, for giving me Matthew and Emma. For every meal, every smile, every moment of these years together." "We did good, didn't we?" Benjamin asked. "With our family, we did great," Mitchell confirmed. "They're all good people, strong, kind, hardworking. They'll do right by the next generation. You're responsible for that." The man they saw every day, teaching them how to be good men and women. "We both are," Mitchell corrected. "Partnership, remember, that's what we've always been." Benjamin thought about that as sleep began to claim her. Partners, lovers, friends, parents, grandparents. They'd been everything to each other and built something that would outlast them both. She fell asleep in Mitchell's arms, as she had for years and would for years to come, safe and loved and home. The years continued to pass gently. They watched their children raise their own families, watched their grandchildren grow and start families of their own. The ranch remained prosperous, managed eventually by Emma, who proved as capable as she'd always claimed she'd be, with help from Matthew and support from her brothers. Mitchell and Benjamin grew very old together, their bodies weakening but their minds sharp and their love unwavering. They moved slower, needed more help, but they were never alone. Their family surrounded them always, making sure they were comfortable, wanted, needed. One evening, when Benjamin was in her 70s and Mitchell a few years older, they sat on the porch as they'd done countless times before. Mitchell's hand shook slightly as he held hers, and Benjamin's breathing was more labored than it used to be, but they were together. "Do you think we get another life after this?" Benjamin asked, philosophical in their old age. "If we do, I hope I find you again," Mitchell said. "I'd choose you every time in every life. Even knowing all the hard parts, especially knowing the hard parts, they're what made it worth it." Thomas came out to check on them, his own hair graying now. "You two need anything?" "We have everything we need," Mitchell said, gesturing to the ranch, the family, the life around them. Thomas smiled, understanding. He sat with them for a while, just being present, and they talked about old times and new times, about the great-grandchildren and the future of the ranch. Eventually, Thomas went back inside and Mitchell and Benjamin were alone again under the stars. "I'm not afraid," Benjamin said quietly, "of what comes next, because we built something that will last. Our family, it's strong, it'll continue." "I'm not afraid either," Mitchell agreed. "Whatever comes, we face it together, like we always have." They sat until the stars came out, until the air grew cold, until Emma came to gently insist they come inside. They went, leaning on each other, still partners after all these years. Mitchell Irving passed away peacefully in his sleep at the age of 79, Benjamin beside him. He simply didn't wake up one morning. his face peaceful and calm. Benjamin was heartbroken but not destroyed. They'd had a long, good life together, and she was grateful for every moment. She lived another 3 years, surrounded constantly by family who made sure she knew she was loved. She told stories to her great-grandchildren about the early days, about their grandfather Mitchell, about the ranch's history. She made sure they understood what family meant, what legacy meant, what love meant. When Benjamin Andrews Irving passed away at the age of 75, quietly in the same bed where Mitchell had died, the whole community mourned. The funeral was huge, attended by what seemed like half of Arizona. Their 5 children stood together, supporting each other. Thomas, James, and William, the sons she'd fought so hard to save. Matthew and Emma, the children of her second chance at love. All of them successful, all of them good people, all of them testimony to what Benjamin and Mitchell had built. They were buried side by side on a hill overlooking the ranch, under a large oak tree Mitchell had planted the year they married. Their headstones were simple but together, as they'd been in life. The ranch continued, passed down through generations, each one adding to the legacy while honoring what came before. The story of Benjamin and Mitchell became family legend, told and retold to each new generation. The desperate widow with 3 sons. The lonely rancher who decided to help. The love that grew from kindness and became something extraordinary. Children were taught, when they were old enough to understand, about the day grandmother Benjamin arrived with her 3 young sons, running from danger. About how great-grandfather Mitchell had chased away the bad men and offered sanctuary. About how grandmother had said, "I have 3 sons already," and great-grandfather had replied, "Then I'm already a father." They were taught that family isn't always about blood, but about choice and commitment and showing up every day. They were taught that love can bloom in the hardest circumstances, that second chances exist, that kindness matters. The ranch house still stood, updated and modernized over the decades, but fundamentally the same. The bedroom where Benjamin and Mitchell had slept for so many years became a family treasure, kept as it had been, a reminder of where it all started. On the mantel in the main room sat a family photo, taken late in Benjamin and Mitchell's life. All 5 of their children, their grandchildren, even some great-grandchildren, gathered around the 2 elderly people at the center. Benjamin and Mitchell were seated, hands clasped, surrounded by the massive family they'd created. In the photo, Mitchell's hand rested on Thomas's shoulder, and Benjamin's other hand held Emma. But what struck everyone who saw the photo was the look on Benjamin and Mitchell's faces. Pure contentment and love, the expression of 2 people who'd lived fully and well. Under the photo was a small plaque with words Mitchell had said once, that Benjamin had remembered and had inscribed after his death. Family isn't found, it's made. One choice, one day, one act of love at a time. The Irving Ranch remained in the family for generations to come, but more than the land or the cattle or the prosperity, what endured was the lesson of that first meeting. That helping someone in need can change everything. That love can heal old wounds. That family is what you make it. That saying yes to responsibility, to commitment, to showing up. That's what creates a legacy. Thomas's great-great-grandson eventually took over the ranch, and he'd walk the property with his own children, telling them the story. This is where your great-great-great-grandmother arrived, running for her life with 3 little boys. And this is where your great-great-great-grandfather decided to help a stranger. Everything we have, everything we are, started with that choice. The children would look at the land, trying to imagine it, and their father would take them to the graves on the hill, where Benjamin and Mitchell rested under the oak tree together forever. They built this, he'd say. Not just the ranch, but the family. They took broken pieces and made something beautiful. And that's what we continue, every generation. We honor them by being the kind of people they raised us to be. And so the legacy continued, watered by love and tended by family, growing stronger with each passing year. The desperate woman in the wagon and the lonely rancher who helped her had become legend. But more than that, they'd become the foundation upon which everything else was built. Their love story wasn't about grand gestures or dramatic moments, though there had been those too. It was about the quiet choices, the daily commitments, the steady presence. It was about a man who saw a woman and her children in need and said, "I can help." About a woman who'd been hurt but found the courage to trust again. About 3 boys who needed a father and found a good one. About 2 more children born into love and security. About a family made not by accident but by intention. In the end, that's what endured. Not wealth or land or success, though they'd had all that. What endured was the love they'd built, the family they'd created, the example they'd set. Benjamin and Mitchell Irving had shown everyone who came after that love, real love, is about choice and action and showing up, day after day after day. And on the Arizona ranch, they'd built together. Under the endless sky, they'd watched countless sunsets beneath. Their legacy lived on, vibrant and strong, a testament to what's possible when 2 people choose each other and commit to building something lasting. Their story ended, as all stories must, but what they created continued, generation after generation. A family bound not just by blood but by the values Benjamin and Mitchell had instilled, the love they'd shared, and the home they'd made together. The ranch still stands, the family still gathers, and the story still gets told, because some love stories don't just end when the people in them pass away. Some love stories become the foundation for everything that comes after, echoing through time, shaping futures, proving that one moment, one choice, one act of compassion can change everything, not just for the people directly involved, but for generations to come. Benjamin and Mitchell's story was that kind of love story, the kind that built legacies and changed lives and proved that family, real family, is made through love and commitment and the choice to show up for each other, no matter what. And that's a story worth telling, worth remembering, worth honoring forever.